Meanwhile, Venezuela's Supreme Court has named Vice President Delcy Rodríguez acting president after President Nicolás Maduro was seized by U.S. Special Forces and flown to New York. The court says the move is temporary, aimed at maintaining administrative continuity, stopping short of triggering new elections. Washington confirmed the operation, releasing images of Maduro in custody and signaling a direct role in Venezuela's transition, including possible troop deployment and plans for the oil sector. Rodríguez has rejected cooperation, demanding Maduro's release. The U.S.-backed opposition made rival claims to power. International reactions has been swift, with China condemning the action, France urging restraint, and the UN raising concerns. Now, China has reacted sharply to the large-scale attack by the U.S. on Venezuela and capture of President Nicolás Maduro. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement that China is shocked by the strongly condemns the U.S. use of force against a sovereign state and action against its president. The ministry also said that the hegemonic acts by the U.S. seriously violates international law and Venezuela's sovereignty and threaten regional peace and security. It added that China firmly opposes them. The statement urges the U.S. to abide by international law and the Charter of the United Nations and stop violating the sovereignty and security of other countries. Joining us now is Dr. Anchang Paul, who joins us from Yaoundé in Cameroon. He's a global political analyst. We also have a global affairs analyst, Dr. Evans Ufeli, who joins us from Toronto in Canada, along with Professor Olexiy Haran, a professor of comparative politics, University of Kiev's Mohyla Academy, joins us from Kiev in Ukraine. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with you. Professor, let me start with you, Professor. Were you really surprised at Maduro's ouster, and what would you say are the real implications of the U.S. action on global peace and stability?
This is a question to me, right?
Yeah, question to you, Professor Haran.
Okay, we know that actually what Maduro created in Venezuela, this was dictatorship, there were falsifications on elections, no respect to human rights. We know about it. However, the way Trump reacted to that, yes, it's a very controversial step. And frankly speaking, we are surprised here in Ukraine because, you know, regarding Russia, Trump doesn't behave in the same way because Russia is attacking Ukraine. Russia doesn't respect human rights. Russia is trying to conquer Ukraine. But President Trump is saying, no, I'm not even supporting Ukraine. I'm just a mediator. So there are no enough guts, you know, to react to what Russia is doing. He demonstrated that he is a forceful man, that he can use force. That's what we expect from him in Russian-Ukrainian war. We are not talking about arms, but we are talking in Ukraine about strong sanctions against Russia. But Trump is not doing it. So, yes, we are a bit surprised, unfortunately, that Trump is very courageous regarding Venezuela. But he doesn't react strongly to what Putin is doing. Actually, I would like to stress about great powers because you quoted Chinese reaction to what happened in Venezuela. And my question to Chinese would be, are you condemning what Russia is doing? You are condemning what the US are doing regarding Venezuela. But are you condemning Russia regarding Ukraine? The answer is no. So these are also double standards from China. So unfortunately, we see that global powers behave without compliance to international law, and that's really pity. Before Trump, actually, the US were strongly in favor of democracy, and they were supporting the so-called free world. But now it seems it's not the case. And yes, Trump's policy reflects imperialist approach, unfortunately.
Let me come to you now, Dr. Evans Ufeli. Now, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the U.S. is only after drug organizations and not Venezuela, but the collateral is highly political. Does that argument mitigate the gravity of the circumstances?
Every state is sovereign. I mean, every state that has gotten independence by international law and is recognized by the United Nations is sovereign. So such incursion is drastically illegal, because when you look at Article 4, Sub 2 of the UN Charter, you will see that every sovereign state has a right to manage its own internal crisis, and they can reach out to external forces when the need is required by their own prerogative. But when you invade, it becomes an issue, because when you look at Article 54 to 51, it talks about the fact that every country have a right to also put up self-defense when there is such invasion of their territorial integrity. So what Trump is doing, or what Trump has done, is a very risky international incursion into a sovereign state that by the UN Charter is supposed to subsist no matter the condition in that country. So for me, I think the argument, whatever argument that is put forth, that is not allowed by the state under reference, where consent is not given, does not hold water in the eyes of the law. So if you look at the statement issued by the African Union, it's in line with this expression that the United States ought not to have done what they did in the circumstance under reference.
Let me come to you now, Dr. Anchang. Now, analysts say Trump cannot run Venezuela without the country's ruling elite. Can that internal support, can that support be secured, and at what cost?
Very important question on the forum. Because in the non-interference of foreign policy, Trump just pretty much just violated the UN Charter. Now, on the domestic side, in terms of the political parties that are in Venezuela, or the political factions that are in Venezuela, Trump is giving, with the use of force, the authority to one faction. Now, that does not bring any solidarity to the Venezuelan problem. That actually creates deeper problems within the various factions, that it would need for the Americans to also use military forces to supplement now the faction that they will support. So it actually creates a seismic effect in terms of domestic policies within Venezuela, within the political parties in Venezuela. It is true that from the form in terms of statute, in terms of democracy, those that were actually, in terms of civil society, looking for freedom, liberties, democracy, in terms of civil rights, they will feel that the capture of the Venezuelan problem, of the Venezuelan president, would ameliorate, maybe say, the human rights condition in Venezuela. But I see more from a political standpoint the fact that there is a deterioration now in terms of politics in the Venezuelan political scene, because mind you, whether you like it or not, the President Maduro had a certain faction and had a certain popularity within Venezuela. Now, the way to be able to do that, it is true that in terms of dictatorship, they view that the electoral process in Venezuela wasn't helping, but the use of force sometimes actually doesn't solve the situation. It actually amplifies the situation, which means that those that were favorable to Maduro will now not be favorable to the United States. And those forces that would want to come into place to be able to enact or have a sovereignty within Venezuela. We saw that in Iraq. We saw that it took many years for the different factions to be able to come together. We saw that in Libya, it led to chaos. So normally interference with the use of military force in this type of situations leads to a gradual deterioration of the political climate in the interior of the republic, because the political factions and the political leaders within these areas normally do not agree to the agenda, because there was an interference, there was a supreme interference by another nation into the political affairs. It also breaks one of the treaties and the pacts that you have signed between the Southern American countries, the Latin American countries, and the United States. The United States, actually, Trump was not that decided to rump out of these treaties as well. So it creates a situation of chaos in terms of domestic policy. It creates a situation of panic within the Central American and the Latin American countries. So it doesn't really help it on a geopolitical front. It gives, just like what I think the other political analysts from Kiev were saying, it leads into a situation of duplicity, in the sense where you pick and choose. The Americans did not really want to help Ukraine in terms of the Trump administration, but pick and choose to use the situation in Venezuela, because many view it economically, because of the Venezuelan oil, that would advantage maybe the U.S. policy in terms of foreign policy, in terms of trade and oil.
Let me come back to you, Professor Haran. Your country equally faces a unique challenge from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Tell me, how do Ukrainians view this parallel from Trump, who's seeking peace within the conflict now?
Okay, let me try to explain. Every situation is not easy, but regarding Russian aggression against Ukraine, it's very clear. It's black and white. We were attacked, we democratic country, we were attacked by imperial state, by dictatorship, which actually promised to recognize and to guarantee our territorial integrity. Russia violated everything, every document Russia signed. So in this situation, yes, we need to say very frankly that who supported Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. By the way, when there were resolutions in the United Nations, most of the world, more than 140 countries supported territorial integrity of Ukraine. Only few countries, voted together with Russia. But, to proclaim some principles is not enough. It's necessary to have real things to prevent aggression. So unfortunately, as I have mentioned, now President Trump, he behaves not like an ally of Ukraine, but he is saying that he's a mediator. Moreover, I would say that he is buying some Putin's narratives, and that's very dangerous. Okay, so Trump actually is thinking about, his view of the world is very simplistic. He has a business type approach. He would like to restore business as usual with Russia. In the same way as Putin, he is viewing the world from imperialist point of view. So it puts Ukraine in a very tough situation, because now we are under pressure not only from Russia, but to some extent from the United States as well. So in this situation, what we expect from the world, it's very important not to stick to double standard policy. We are denouncing aggression in every corner of the world. So if you are denouncing the United States behavior in some regions, we need to denounce Russian behavior in the same way. We need to denounce what Putin is doing. So the question about double standards, it's not only about great powers, it's also about other countries in the world. To what extent we are ready, to guarantee international security and international law. Because violation of international law in one part of the world escalate the same violations in the other parts of the world as well. Again, it's not only about Russia, United States, it's also about China. It's also about other countries with aggressive intentions.
All right, let me come to you now, Dr. Evans Ufeli. Now, this situation is like the accuser about to serve justice. How is America morally and legally empowered to do what they have just done to Venezuela?
Yeah, America is not morally empowered to do such. I mean, we have to hold the American Congress responsible, because the American Congress is supposed to oversight the action of Trump, who is in charge of the executive. So was this approved by the American Congress? That is one of the questions we need to ask. Did this go through, the scrutiny of that House? Okay, I don't know whether it went through that, but I doubt it. And if you look at the entire scenario, it appears Trump is acting independent of constituted authorities. He's infringing on the rights of countries with sovereignty. And that in itself is dangerous for democracy globally, world politics, and even for trade, okay? Because the case under reference now, what is going to happen? By tomorrow, they said they're going to install the vice president and all that. So that instability that is being created across the world without following due process is one that is uncalled for, because the United Nations sits right there in the US, okay? And so the actions of Trump must be curtailed, because if another country acts in this way, the Americans are very quick to give out sanction and to sanction countries that go against international laws. In the case under reference that America is not going against international law, who is going to sanction the United States on this issue? That's a question that is being thrown globally. Are they going to get away with this? Is Trump going to get away with this? Or how exactly does this fit into international law policies and the general well-being of the countries across the world? It is not the way to go. There are other ways this issue ought to have been handled in ways that comply with laid down protocols. You know that Venezuela, under the UN Charter, have a right to put up self-defense. And if they had done that, that would have perhaps led to an outbreak of conflict, armed conflict across that region against the US. And this may also escalate into, something that may not be, the world may not be able to contain or curtail in the nearest future. So my advice is that the United States need to take it easy, go back to the drawing board, look at what is possible under international law before actions are taken. And that is why I'm calling that the US Congress be held responsible, because they have a laid down responsibility and obligation to oversight the President of the United States. And the advice they give to him and what they allow is what can be allowed. What they do not allow will not be allowed. So in this case, was this approved by them and all that? So these are questions that the United States need to answer to the world.
All right,
so that we know exactly why these actions is being carried on this way.
Let me come to you now, Dr. Paul. Now, the African Union has said sovereignty is sacrosanct, but it appears they can't do more than, issue a statement. My question is, what should Africa's true response have been, at least in the interest of the global South?
No, that's a very important question, but we cannot undermine the importance of the statement as well. The African Union did something which is very laudable, because you have to understand, in a geopolitical context, in terms of force, African nations cannot rival the United States, which is one of the powerful nations in the world in terms of military might. So therefore, the statement itself is very powerful, because it underscores the importance for solidarity, for non-interference in territorial integrity. So that's a very key important point. Because of that solidarity, that's why the African Union, with the other African treaties or communities such as ECAS, ECOWAS, CEAS, CEMAC, because that's how the African Union functions also in itself. We have these other African communities that work together in bilateral or multilateral corporations that allow the African continent to be able to fight certain economic and public policy challenges as well. Now, this is a security challenge which we're talking about, where there's a violent violation of international law in terms of the UN Charter. Now, I personally think Donald Trump does not necessarily care about the international agreement. He has a political vision. His political vision is aligned with certain political interests in terms of foreign policy for the United States per his own vision. So therefore, it cuts short the importance of the U.S. Congress, which at this particular moment, I think for myself, is catered to the interests of Donald Trump. Maybe in November 2026, when there might be a new Congress in the United States Congress, we might see a tougher Congress that can maybe look at Trump and accuse him and hold him responsible for some of these international violations and transgressions. But in the meantime, the African Union is doing something which is very, it's salient, but it's very diplomatic in the sense of call to order, a reminder that in terms of international and the UN Charter, we have to be respectfully be able to not interfere in the territorial integrity of other nations, because the African continent, more than any other continent in the world, has seen many insecurities. We have Mali, we have Burkina Faso, we have the Sahel, we have seen Libya. So we have had these experiences to be able to show the world that if you do not follow the due process in terms of diplomatic relationships and non-interference, it could lead to chaos, because there's certain key things in every territorial integrity. There's the legislature, there's the executive, and there's an electoral process. So the violation and the interference in the territorial sovereignty disregards all these institutional capacities which lead the populations to divert, and therefore you create factions. And once these factions become violent, it therefore becomes very difficult to build the society upon. So I think for my part, the African Union is sending a reminder. It is subtle because we don't have the military might in terms of Africa to be able to respond to the United States. But I would also think on the contradictory, if Africa had the nuclear might to be able to respond, then therefore their statement would have a double impact in terms of pressure. I think, just like the professor was saying, there's a double standard here, where Trump necessarily in an imperialistic manner feels that he can align with Putin in a sense where we are the leaders of the world, but does not necessarily cater to the interest of the population of Ukrainians who are bombarded every day, and Russia, which recruits Africans as soldiers to fight for Russia, but Africans cannot necessarily cry for the soldiers that have died on the war front on the cause of Russia. So there's certain key issues.
Dr. Paul, I'm sorry, pardon me, but I have to just butt in here. That's because we're pressed for time. But before I let you gentlemen go, just 30 seconds, your final thoughts. I'll start with you, Professor Haran. 30 seconds.
Final, actually, thank you to my colleague who mentioned Ukraine. Actually, right now, the missile alarm is announced in the whole Ukraine. So please remember that we are under bombardments every day. And right now, when I'm talking to you again, as I have said, air alarm is announced on the whole territory of the whole Ukraine. So please stand up for Ukraine and for other countries of the world as well.
All right, Dr. Ufeli, please, you have 30 seconds. Closing remarks.
Caution is the key word here. Caution is required. Every action must be well thought out in situations like this. I do not think that the United States is right on this. And so the entire world should condemn this action and as much as possible, put an end to such kind of invasion, to respect international law and international policy to keep the world at peace.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for having this conversation with us. I really, really appreciate that.